The old man arrived at the airbase quietly, almost unnoticed, just as the morning sun climbed over the runway. His steps were slow but steady, the kind of steps that belonged to someone who had walked through more dangers than anyone around him could imagine. His clothes were simple: an old jacket, faded jeans, and boots covered with dust from long roads. He carried no bags, no official documents, nothing that proved who he once was. But anyone who looked closely could see something in his eyes. Something heavy, something sharp, something that came only from a life of service. He came only to meet an old friend, a retired mechanic who still worked part-time near the hangars. He had not planned to stay long. He did not want attention. He preferred silence. But fate had other ideas waiting for him at the airbase that day. As he stepped closer to the hangar area, a sharp alarm suddenly cut through the air. Red lights flashed. Voices shouted. People rushed past him as if the world was collapsing. Young cadets sprinted across the runway, some confused, some scared. Technicians carrying toolboxes ran toward a helicopter that had just made a rough, shaking landing. The old man paused, his heart tightening. Something was wrong. A large military helicopter sat in the middle of the runway, its rotor blades slowing down and whining like a wounded animal. Smoke curled out from the engine vents. The landing skids were crooked, showing it had not touched the ground gently. Crew members jumped out in panic, yelling to the engineers waiting nearby. "Engine failure," one shouted. "We can't restart it," yelled another. The old man watched from a distance, his expression calm but serious. He recognized the fear, the urgency, the helplessness in their faces. Had seen all this before years ago, in a very different war, in a very different place. An officer barked orders, trying to control the chaos. "Move, move, we need this bird back in the air. The mission window is closing." Technicians surrounded the helicopter. Some climbed onto ladders, trying to reach the engine panels. Others connected cables, checking power lines, but nothing worked. The helicopter stayed silent and cold. Inside the cockpit, pilots tried switch after switch, but the system stayed dead. The old man stood quietly behind a row of orange cones, watching. No one paid attention to him. To them, he was just another visitor, maybe someone's grandfather. He didn't mind. In fact, he preferred it that way. But the longer he watched, the more he noticed things that others did not. The angle of the rotor blades, the strain in the landing gear, the smell in the air-burned fuel mixed with overheated metal. These were signs only an experienced eye could read. A young cadet, barely 20, rushed past him and stopped for a second to stare at the old man. "Sir, you shouldn't be here. Please step back." The old man nodded without saying anything. His voice stayed inside him, but his mind kept racing. Another alarm sounded, this time deeper, louder. The commanding officer shouted again. "If we don't get this helicopter back up, we lose the entire mission. Clock is ticking." The crowd around the helicopter grew. The tension rose. Everyone looked desperate, and yet no one knew the truth, that the answer they needed was standing only a few meters away, watching quietly with old, tired eyes. The old man turned his face slightly. Memory flashed another. Helicopter, another emergency landing, another time when everyone looked at him for answers. He remembered the sound of explosions in the distance, the smell of burning sand, and the heavy pressure of leading a team when everything depended on him. Those days felt far away now, but the knowledge was still in his bones. A technician shouted. Frustrated. "We've tried everything, it won't start." The officer snapped back. "Try again. We need this machine running." The old man took a slow step forward, then another. He didn't intend to get involved, but something deep inside pulled him toward the helicopter. Maybe it was habit, maybe it was instinct. Or maybe he simply couldn't stand watching a machine die on the ground as he moved closer. He heard short pieces of the officer's conversation. "Should we call headquarters? There's no time. Mission delay means mission failure. Someone needs to fix this engine." The officer clenched his fists. "We need a miracle." The old man stopped walking. A miracle. People used to call him that once, not because he was special, but because he survived things no one else survived. because he fixed things that everyone else thought were impossible, because he knew helicopters better than he knew his own home. He looked at the aircraft again. The engine wasn't dead. It wasn't broken beyond repair. He could tell from the sound, from the smell, from the way the panels vibrated. Something was locked. Something was jammed inside. Something the new generation of technicians had never seen before. He knew what it was, but no one knew that he knew. Behind him, steady sound of boots approached. A heavy presence, a strong voice. "Excuse me, sir?" The officer stopped near him. The old man looked up slowly. The officer stared at him, confused but curious. "You look familiar. Have we met before?" The old man simply shook his head. The officer turned slightly, examining his face again. "You were watching the helicopter very closely. Do you know something?" The old man hesitated. He wasn't sure if he should speak. He hadn't fixed a helicopter in years. He didn't want to interfere. Maybe he was too old now. But then the officer said something that changed everything. "We are losing time. If we don't get that helicopter airborne, people will be in danger." Danger. That word hit him like a bullet. It awakened something inside him that had been sleeping for years. He lifted his eyes and spoke for the first time. His voice was low but firm. "I can help." The officer raised an eyebrow. "Help? With what?" The old man pointed toward the helicopter with that engine. "I know what's wrong." The officer stared at him, measuring him, trying to judge if he was serious. And then, suddenly, someone behind the officer spoke with surprise and respect in his voice. "Sir, do you know who that man is?" The officer turned sharply. "Who?" the young cadet whispered, almost shocked. "He's a combat veteran, a helicopter specialist, a legend, sir." The officer looked back at the old man, eyes wide, and as the old man stepped forward toward the broken helicopter, the entire base seemed to hold its breath. Something big was about to happen, something no one expected, something they would never forget. The old man's quiet steps toward the helicopter seemed to slow down time. Every person nearby watched him, unsure of what he was doing, unsure of who he really was. His boots touched the cracked concrete, and the morning wind carried the faint smell of fuel around him. It was almost like the airbase itself recognized him before the people did. The officer who had spoken to him earlier followed close behind, still unsure if trusting an unknown old man was a smart decision. The young cadet who had whispered about the old man's past kept staring at him with wide eyes, as if seeing a ghost from an old war story. The old man stopped a few feet from the damaged helicopter. The aircraft looked tired, like a warrior forced to kneel. Smoke curled from the vents, and the engine casing vibrated with an irregular pulse. The crew around it froze, confused by the quiet stranger stepping into their circle. One technician frowned. "Sir, you can't be here. This area is restricted." Before the officer could answer, the old man spoke softly. "I just need to listen." His calm voice surprised everyone. A few technicians exchanged puzzled looks, but no one dared to interrupt again. Something about his presence felt heavy, like experience had wrapped itself around him. He moved closer and placed a hand on the helicopter's metal surface. The warmth, the tremble, the faint clicking inside, he could feel it all. The machines had their own language, and this one was speaking to him, telling him exactly what it needed. The officer leaned toward the young cadet. "You said he's a veteran. How do you know?" The cadet swallowed nervously. "Sir, I've seen his face in old training books, not his name, but his missions. My drill sergeant used to mention a man who could restart engines under fire, a man who saved entire crews when everything went wrong. I think this might be him. Before the officer could respond, heavy footsteps echoed across the runway. Everyone turned. A tall man in a decorated uniform was walking toward them, broad shoulders, sharp eyes, and a stern expression that could silence an entire room. This was the base commander. This was the general. A ripple of shock went through the crowd. People straightened their backs instantly. Technicians stopped talking. Pilots snapped to attention. The general approached slowly, his eyes fixed on the old man. His expression changed, first confusion, then recognition, and finally something like respect buried under years of authority. He stopped right in front of the old man. "It's been a long time," the general said quietly. A wave of surprise spread through the crew. They looked at the old man again, trying to understand who he truly was. The old man finally turned toward the general. "You remember me?" "How could I forget?" the general replied. "You taught half of my instructors, and you saved more soldiers than I can count." His voice lowered. "We should have never lost contact with you." The technicians stared, stunned. The officer blinked in disbelief. The cadet's jaw almost dropped. The old man sighed. "I didn't come here to be remembered." "I know," the general said. "But we need you now." He pointed at the helicopter. "We're running out of time. Our mission team is waiting. They need to fly out before the enemy reaches the safe route. If this helicopter does not leave the ground in the next few minutes, the mission fails, and people will die." Silence fell across the group. The old man looked at the helicopter again. He could feel the pressure tightening around the airfield like an invisible rope. He had felt this before on nights, when explosions shook the ground, when wounded soldiers cried out, when he was the last hope. "You know the problem?" the general asked. The old man nodded. "Yes, the engine lockout has triggered. Your technicians are trying to restart it too quickly. They don't know the old systems." A technician stepped forward, frustrated. "Sir, we followed all procedures." The old man lifted a hand gently. "Procedures won't help. This model has a hidden safety lock. It activates when the engine overheats. It must be bypassed manually. If you keep forcing it, the system will freeze completely." The technicians went silent. None of them had ever heard of such a thing. The general looked at his team. "Is this true?" One engineer answered hesitantly. "Sir, we don't have training on older lockout systems. They remove this mechanism in the newer models." "And this helicopter isn't new," the general said sharply. The old man placed a hand on the engine access panel. "Open this section." The officer signaled a technician who unlocked the panel. The metal plate swung open, revealing a tangle of wires, valves, and old mechanical parts. The old man leaned in, brushing away dust and burnt residue. His fingers moved slowly but confidently. He pressed a small switch that no one else noticed. A faint click echoed inside the machine. "That's the manual override," he said. "But it's jammed from the heat. I need a tool." The cadet stepped forward instantly. "Sir, take mine." The old man accepted the small metal tool with a nod. "Thank you." He adjusted the override switch carefully, turning it just a few degrees. Then he looked at the control panel inside the cockpit. "I need someone to follow my steps exactly," he said. A young pilot raised his hand. "I'll do it, sir." The old man climbed halfway into the cockpit, leaning over the seat. He pointed at a switch. "Turn that on." Slowly. The pilot obeyed. "Now press the starter in short taps. Don't hold it." The pilot did as told. The engine coughed faintly. The technicians leaned closer, their hearts racing. Again, the old man said. The pilot tapped the switch, another cough. A deeper rumble. The helicopter seemed to shiver, like a creature waking from a long sleep. The general stepped closer. "Is it working?" "If the override holds," the old man murmured, "the engine will catch." The pilot tapped again. This time the engine growled louder. The rotor blades twitched, then turned a little. Fuel lines rattled. Vibrations ran through the frame. One more tap, the helicopter roared. Everyone gasped. The engine surged with life. The blades spinning faster and faster until a strong wind blasted across the runway. The technicians cheered. The cadet pumped his fist. Even the officer let out a breath he had been holding for minutes. The general looked at the old man with deep respect. "You just saved this mission." The old man stepped back from the helicopter, the wind blowing through his gray hair. "The machine did what it was built to do," he said. "I only reminded it how—" He turned to walk away, but the general called out, "Wait, we're not done. I want you with me." The old man stopped. A new chapter was about to begin. The helicopter's engine was alive again. But its roar did not erase the tension hanging in the air. The mission team stood ready nearby, helmets on, gear packed, waiting for the final green signal. But the old man did not step back. Instead, he stared at the rattling machine with a deep, Thoughtful looked like someone listening to a voice others could not hear. Something still wasn't right. He raised a hand toward the pilot and motioned for him to shut it down. The pilot hesitated, but trusted the old man now more than anyone else. Slowly, he powered down the engine again. The rotor blades slowed, slicing the air with heavy, fading whooshes. The general stepped forward. "Is something wrong?" The old man didn't answer immediately. He walked around the helicopter slowly, his boots scraping softly against the concrete. His fingers touched the metal body again, feeling its vibrations even as the engine wound down. Everyone watched him silently. Technicians whispered among themselves, "Why is he checking again?" But the engine already started. He said, "Something still feels off." The officer approached him carefully. "Sir, is there another problem?" The old man crouched near the lower panel of the helicopter. "Yes," he said quietly. The engine started, but it shouldn't have overheated that fast earlier. Something else triggered it. The general frowned. "Explain?" The old man stood again, his eyes sharp. "Engines don't fail for no reason. There is always a cause. If we send this helicopter out without finding it, we risk losing the aircraft and the people inside." The crew fell silent. A single sentence from him carried more weight than all the officers' commands combined. The general nodded. "Then we investigate." The technicians opened more panels under the old man's instructions. They removed bolts, lifted grates, and cleaned off layers of dust and grease. Some of these parts had not been touched in years. The cadet who admired the old man earlier moved closer. "Sir, do you need help with anything?" The old man gave him a small nod. "Hold the light here." The cadet held a flashlight, steady as the old man leaned deeper into the engine bay. Examining every wire with slow, careful movements, he touched the fuel line and frowned. It was slightly warmer than expected. Then he moved to the secondary ignition unit. Something felt strange. His fingers brushed a small black mark, barely visible, but definitely present. He leaned back. "Burn marks," he said. One technician looked confused. "Sir, burn marks from what?" The old man pointed. "This part overheated before the failure, but the ignition should have shut down automatically. It didn't. That means something blocked the safety switch." The general folded his arms. "Blocked? How?" The old man turned and faced him. Something foreign entered the engine. A ripple of shock passed through the crew. "You mean sabotage?" One engineer whispered. The old man didn't confirm it out loud. He simply said, "Let's find the source." He went back to work, checking every small compartment. His movements were slow, but precise like someone performing surgery. The cadet watched him with admiration. "How do you know all this?" the young man asked softly. The old man paused, his face shadowed. "Because I once had to fix an engine while bullets were flying around me. I had to learn how helicopters breathe and how they suffer." The cadet swallowed hard. "Sir, were you really in that famous desert mission?" The one where the old man cut him off gently. "Not now." They continued examining. At last, the old man reached the lower fuel intake valve. When he opened it, something small and metallic rolled out onto his hand. Everyone stared. It was a tiny piece of broken metal, a fragment, but enough to cause serious trouble if stuck in the wrong place. One of the technicians stepped closer. "Sir, that shouldn't be inside the intake." "No," the old man said softly. "It shouldn't." The general's voice hardened. "Where did it come from?" The old man studied the fragment. "It looks like a piece of a worn-out connector. Probably broke off from the fuel flow control system." He paused. But it didn't fall naturally. It was forced into the intake. The general's jaw tightened. The officer next to him clenched his fists. "Someone tampered with the helicopter?" The general asked. The old man nodded. "Yes, someone wanted this engine to fail under pressure. Yes, someone wanted this engine to fail under pressure." The entire area went silent. Even the wind felt still. The general ordered, "Secure the perimeter. Only essential personnel remain." Guards moved instantly, blocking off the area. Technicians stepped back nervously. Pilots exchanged worried looks. The officer turned to the old man. "Can you tell who did it?" The old man shook his head. Not yet. But whoever it was knew what they were doing. The general spoke firmly. We will find them. But right now, we need to fix this helicopter. Lives depend on it. The old man returned to the damaged valve. We need a new connector piece. The spare should be in the old parts storage. The technician hesitated. Sir, that storage hasn't been used in years. The old man looked at him. Then it's exactly where the part will be. 2 engineers rushed off to find it. The old man kept examining the rest of the engine while they were gone. He checked the wiring one last time. Everything else seemed stable. The damage was limited and fixable. The general stepped closer, lowering his voice. Tell me honestly, can this helicopter fly safely? The old man looked straight into his eyes. Yes, but only if we fix it properly, and only if the person who tampered with it doesn't try again. 8. The general nodded slowly. His expression had changed. He wasn't worried anymore. He was angry. Minutes later, the engineers returned, holding an old, dusty box. Inside it lay a spare connector, small, metallic, perfect for the damaged valve. The old man took it gently, almost with respect. This will work. With steady hands, he installed the new piece, tightening it carefully, making sure every part aligned perfectly. Then he cleaned the area, cleared the vent, and rechecked the ignition system. The skipper pilot watched him in awe. Sir, it's like you've been doing this your whole life. The old man gave a faint smile. I have. When he finally stepped back, he exhaled slowly. The engine is ready. Start it again, the general gave a hand. Signal. The pilot climbed into the cockpit and began the restart. Sequence, everyone leaned forward. 1 tap, 2 taps. The engine coughed, growled, then roared back to life stronger, louder. Cleaner than before, the helicopter vibrated with renewed strength. Like a warrior reborn. The general looked at the old man with deep respect. You saved us again. The old man didn't answer. His eyes were fixed on the horizon. Something told him this wasn't over yet. The hangar felt colder that night, as if the walls themselves were holding their breath. Everyone stood silently around the helicopter, watching Sergeant Rowan move slowly toward the open engine panel. The storm outside was growing louder, wind hitting the metal roof in heavy waves. It almost sounded like distant gunfire, the kind Rowan had heard long ago. Captain Harris stepped forward. Sir, are you sure you want to do this? The engine is unstable. One wrong move. Rowan raised a hand gently. Son, Danger and I know each other well. We shook hands many years ago. The room fell silent. He placed his old, trembling hands on the helicopter frame. The metal was cold, but familiar, like meeting an enemy you once respected. He leaned closer, eyes narrowing, studying the fuel lines and ignition system. Every movement he made was slow, careful, and strangely confident. Private Mills whispered to another mechanic, How does he know all this? He's not even touching a manual. Rowan heard him and smiled. Back in the day, we didn't have manuals. We had seconds. He reached deeper inside the engine compartment, fingers brushing against wires the younger crew didn't even notice. Something clicked in his mind. A memory. A battlefield. Smoke rising from a burning helicopter. A young pilot screaming for help, and him rushing forward without thinking. He shook the thought away and focused. This line, he muttered. Tapping a hidden valve is blocked. The fuel pressure is wrong. The new system doesn't show the fault because it's too modern to expect this mistake. Captain Harris blinked. We didn't see that. Not even the diagnostics caught it. Rohan simply shrugged. Machines may be newer, but mistakes are old. He pulled out a small tool from his pocket, a tiny metal pick, sharp and worn. My lucky little friend, he said softly. Been with me since '78. The crew watched as he reached into the engine again, using the pick to release the stuck valve. A sudden hiss of air escaped, startling everyone. The fuel line vibrated, then settled. Rowan stepped back. Try it now. Harris hesitated. Are you sure? Rowan nodded. If it doesn't work, then I'm wrong. And son, I'm not often wrong. Harris climbed into the cockpit. The crew gathered behind Rowan. The storm thundered outside. lightning flashing across the hangar. Harris turned the key. The helicopter coughed once, twice. Then the engine roared to life, steady and smooth. The entire hangar erupted. Shouts, cheers, laughter, even disbelief. Rowan didn't react. He simply watched the rotor blades spin, his eyes reflecting their motion. He looked like a man who had just found a forgotten piece of his soul. Harris jumped out of the cockpit and rushed to him. "Sir, I don't know how to thank you." Rowan placed a hand on his shoulder. "Sun, engines, are like soldiers. Treat them well, and they'll fight for you." "But why did you help us?" Harris asked. Rowan paused. The hangar fell quiet again. "Because once, long ago, someone helped me. And I promised myself, if I ever saw a crew in trouble, I'd repay the debt." Harris swallowed, emotion hitting him harder than he expected. "You saved us." "No," Rowan said with a soft smile, turning toward the exit. "I reminded you that experience still matters." He walked slowly toward the door. The storm had softened, the wind now calm. As he stepped outside, lightning illuminated him for a brief, powerful moment like a final salute, and then he disappeared into the night, leaving behind a running helicopter and a crew who would never again underestimate a forgotten war veteran. The end. The end.